Hi, my name is Elizabeth Egan, and I'm a chemistry teacher at Madison Park Technical Vocational High School in Boston. In this screencast, I'm going to be talking about classroom practices as they pertain to safety. So the goals of this video are to review best practices for teaching and paying attention to safety in our lab and classroom spaces as science teachers. Also, how to document that you are considering safety in your teaching, and some ideas for activities and lessons to increase the presence of safety in your classroom. So for a little context, last year was my first full year teaching. So as you know, there are a million things that we're trying to pay attention to as teachers, and half of those million are all supposed to be top priority, and they're all fighting for our attention. Safety is one of those things. So I know that I did not do the best I can do as far as safety goes last year. So in creating the screencast, I was thinking a lot about how I am going to try to improve my own practice, and that's kind of comes through in what I'm going to share with you. So to start off, the biggest and easiest thing to do is to have a safety contract. So there are safety contracts on the Science Weekly. If you scroll down to Science Safety, there are contracts for elementary school students, safety acknowledgements, and also middle and high school safety contracts. Click on that link, it brings you to Flynn Scientific's page, and this is where we get the safety contracts that we use as a district. So you'll see they're there in English and in Spanish for high school and middle school. There are also safety exams, and you could use that exam or just pull questions from it. So this safety contract might look familiar to you, but just in case you haven't seen it before, this is what it looks like. It goes through many different considerations and lays out student responsibilities. The student takes it home and they sign and date, and their parent or guardian signs and dates, acknowledging that they have received and reviewed this document. So the student brings it back when it's signed by a parent, and you make a copy of the contract, keep the original, and send a copy home with the student so they have it for reference. Additionally, before I send home the safety contract, I reviewed it with my students. I pulled out important sections that I felt like were really pertinent to what we would be doing in class, just to make sure that they were reading excerpts of it and looking at the document to see what it was that they were signing. In terms of documenting teaching safety, so best practices are keeping that safety contract that I was just talking about. And also your lesson plans will reflect that you're teaching safety. So for example, at the start of the year, when you are talking about that safety contract and talking about safety in your classroom and in the lab space that you use, your lesson plan will say that you devoted the time to that. So that reflects that you're teaching safety. Additionally, before each lab, your lesson plan can reflect that you review the hazards and the considerations that are specific to that lab with the students. Another documentation could be lab reports or lab handouts that have the safety considerations on them, whether it's students writing them or you providing them. Those are all ways to document that you're teaching safety. So my plans to expand safety even beyond that in my classroom are the following. The first thing is I'm going to have my students do a MSDS card sort, or I think it's just SDS now, safety data sheet card sort. What I mean by that is I'm going to disassemble a safety data sheet for a chemical and then have the students kind of put it back together as a puzzle so they become familiar with where on a safety data sheet to look for information that they might need to make sure they're staying safe in their handling of that chemical. One reason that I'm really focusing on this is because my students, as vocational students, have to learn how to read safety data sheets for their vocation. So it's a way that we're integrating science and vocation. So I'm also going to have students before certain labs pull up the SDSs for the chemicals that we're using and have them determine what we need to do to make sure we're safe in the lab to increase the ownership that they feel for that. Obviously, I'll have my own ideas of what we need to do to be safe, and just make sure the students arrive at those same ideas. I also want to generally increase my language and the amount that I use safety language in the classroom, just to increase the amount that students are thinking about it. So other practices or other ideas that you could include in your classroom include modeling good best practices. So wearing your PPE, the way that you handle chemicals, the way that you approach thinking about safety. So all of those things are modeling for your students safe behavior. You could also have safety quizzes before your labs, so questions that the students have to answer to indicate that they are aware of the safety concerns coming up. You should also make sure you have appropriate signage. So, for example, the location of the safety shower or the location of the fire extinguisher. For more information about that, you can go to the BPS Science Weebly and look for the screencasts about the science safety plan. They have information about what signs should be present in your classroom or laboratory. Also, labeling secondary containers with the hazards. So, for example, if you're using ethanol in a lab, make sure that beaker that student is handling, that secondary container, not only says ethanol, but also says that it's flammable. So it's very clear in that moment that student is using that chemical, what the hazard is. You could also post safety considerations in the classroom or in the lab that pertain to that lab specifically, and include safety information in handouts that you pass to the students about the lab. So how do you find out what safety concerns there are for a lab? So the easiest way is to go to the BPS Science Weebly. Again, scroll down to the science safety section. And for chemistry in particular, there is tons of information here that relates to each of the labs that we do that relate to living by chemistry. And even if you don't use that curriculum exactly, I think you'll find that a lot of the labs match up. So when you click on these links and click on a lab, what comes up is something like this. It has what PPE should be worn, controls and spill responses. It talks about how to handle the different chemicals that are part of the lab. It talks about possible byproducts, and it also includes the SDS for each of the chemicals that are involved in the lab. So it's everything that you need really conveniently in one location. So that's a really great place to start. If you're doing a lab that you find is not in the curriculum, go to Flynn Scientific and search for the SDS for the chemicals involved in the lab and look to see what the hazards are. You can also look for SDSs just on Google. I just find Flynn a really easy place to go because we order most of our chemicals from Flynn, so they have all of the SDSs there electronically, so I don't have to go searching through the binder. And if you have any questions about any of the information that's been in this video or any safety related questions, I recommend checking out the additional safety related videos that myself and Scott Balicki recorded that are at the BPS Science Weebly. And there are also a lot of Flynn Scientific safety videos that are really informative and helpful and clarify a lot of questions. Again, you can get to them from the BPS Science Weebly. And if that doesn't help clear up your question, feel free to email bpsscience@gmail.com, and they will help direct you to someone who can answer that question for you if they cannot answer it themselves. Thank you so much for your time.